Well, friends, we did it. This is the final episode in my 24-part James Bond video game retrospective. At least for now. If you happen to stumble upon only this video, yeah, be sure to go check out the rest of the series. I cover every James Bond game in existence, minus the obscure mobile ones or unofficial ones. It's been a really fun ride, but there is still work to do. Let's see where this series ends and if it goes out on a high note. Last time, we reached an entirely new decade. The 10s, or 2010s, or teens, whatever. It was 2010, and Activision released a pair of games on the exact same day over the current systems. The remake of Goldeneye and an original story, Bloodstone. Neither were massive hits or anything, but critics and fans tended to favor Goldeneye of the two. I've come to find that Bloodstone does have its fans though. In 2011, Activision chose to release Goldeneye on the Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3 and called it Goldeneye Reloaded, with more polished graphics over the Wii version. But 2012 was going to be a huge year. Not only was it time for Daniel Craig's third Bond film, but 2012 marked 50 years since the release of the very first Bond film, Dr. No, going all the way back to Sean Connery's OG release. The Bond series had to do something big, and with 2 more years left on Activision's license to make Bond games, they had an idea to pay tribute to 50 years of Bond films and all 6 main actors who portrayed the role. There was a lot of speculation that they would make a game tie-in for the new movie Skyfall, but that did not happen. They wanted to do more of a medley of sorts and focus on the past rather than the present. For the first time since 2005's From Russia With Love, I was hyped for this game, entitled 007 Legends. And contradicting that point entirely, I've never played this. The announcement for this concept sounded incredibly interesting. The plan was to have the story take place among all 6 different Bond actors and with one of their films each. So I presumed Mission 1 would be playing through the story of Goldfinger, for example, as Sean Connery, Mission 2 would be on Her Majesty's Secret Service as George Lazenby, and so on. I assumed they would be perhaps a truncated version of each film, since they probably weren't going to throw in 6 full-sized games into one package, so I didn't know if they're going to try and link all the stories together or separate them entirely or what. If you've ever played the game Eternal Darkness, I kinda hoped it would be like that. If you don't know what I'm referring to, that game has a central protagonist who you play as, and she reads chapters from a book in which you play through those chapters as different characters among different time periods. It could be like Bond reminiscing or having flashbacks about the Bond history. The possibilities were exciting, and I remember following the development through 2011 and 2012. In 2012, I had since moved to another new city, still living in an apartment, and really focusing on growing my Bond collection. I still didn't own an Xbox 360, and I've never owned a PlayStation 3, so I was still bummed to learn that 007 Legends was not going to be a Wii release. But 2012 was also a big year for video gaming. The 8th generation was set to kick off in November, the same time as 007 Legends and Skyfall. This time though, Nintendo was going to be the company to kick off their new hardware with the announcement of the Wii U. The Wii U's biggest feature was the option to play Wii U games on a TV or the external tablet controller that came with it. Just to slightly jump ahead a bit, this concept got perfected with the Nintendo Switch, but the Wii U was the originator of this feature. The Wii U, unfortunately, didn't quite capture the hearts of consumers as it notoriously endured quite a short lifespan and is considered to be a failure from Nintendo and fans alike. It wasn't a disaster of a system or anything, there are some really good games for it, but Nintendo wants to distance themselves from the Wii U entirely at this point as their focus is on the Switch, with a lot of the Wii U games actually being ported to it. I think the name Wii U played a big part in this, as it sounds like it's simply an upgraded Wii. Dropping a few extra hundo on an updated Wii didn't sound too appealing for gamers, and I grouped myself into this camp. I had no desire to rush out and buy a Wii U. I did eventually buy one used in 2019 and have enjoyed the few games I've played for it, but yeah, that whole thing was a bit of a misstep. It ended up selling just over 13 million units, a bit lower than the GameCube even, and even that didn't sell very well, especially compared to the monster success that the Wii was with over 101 million sold. So what does this have to do with 007 Legends? Well, the original release for the game was on the Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3, but a Windows port was weeks later, and it was ported to the Wii U in December of 2012, making that the newest official James Bond video game to date. And this is the version that I own. Sony and Microsoft wouldn't release their 8th gen systems until late 2013 with the PlayStation 4 and Xbox One, so those don't matter in the slightest for this retrospective. Activision hired on veteran developer Eurocom for their final release, making this their 6th developed Bond game. So, we have a pretty solid start, a very intriguing concept, modern 7th gen and even 8th gen systems, a veteran developer working on it, the 50th anniversary of Bond films, a new hyped Bond film on the horizon. What could go wrong? Things were looking up for the Bond series as a whole. So let's see exactly what they did come up with, if this game was a success or not, and why we haven't had a new Bond video game in almost 9 years now at the time of me writing this. I'm going to try and make this one a big one, as it is the finale after all. Instead of showcasing just the first 2 levels like I typically do, we're going to go through and discuss all 6 featured Bond films in this one, baby. Let's check out the back of the box. No, let's check out both sides of the box.
Everybody get ready and buckle up, cause here we go!
So my first impressions of the front cover, only Daniel Craig is featured. So if this is supposed to be highlighting Bond's history, shouldn't all 6 actors be featured here? I get that he is the newest Bond, but They chose to show only 3 screenshots from 3 movies to get an idea of the few films that are featured here. The first is clearly Goldfinger with the infamous nude gold-painted corpse of Jill Masterson, and this choice doesn't surprise me in the slightest. Goldfinger is simply beloved. I would have guessed Goldfinger or Dr. No for Connery's selection here. The heavy hitter or the original, and they went with the heavy hitter. Next we see, oh boy, Bond's invisible car from Die Another Day. Yeah, I guess that makes sense. Die Another Day is the only Pierce Brosnan Bond film that didn't get a game release. I probably would have still guessed Goldeneye since we know how often that keeps getting brought up throughout the series, but okay, Die Another Day is the one it should be. Lastly, we get the image of Jaws skydiving from the intro to Moonraker to cover the Roger Moore era. Moonraker is an interesting choice as it's considered to be one of the more ridiculous Bond films. I probably would have guessed The Spy Who Loved Me for more, but alright, Moonraker it is. There already is a Spy Who Loved Me game, but there's also a Goldfinger game, albeit a text-only adventure, but still. But this sticker is a bit troubling. Instructions to unlock Skyfall mission included inside. Unlock? Like, paid downloadable content? Let's hope not. It's an okay cover, it's just screenshots from the film, so there was not much creativity thrown into this one. Alright, onto the back. So we get a couple more images of Goldfinger, Moonraker, and Die Another Day to confirm those being the films used with the actual game footage. On Her Majesty's Secret Service is the only George Lazenby option, so that one is obvious, and we learn that Timothy Dalton's film of choice is License to Kill. With only 2 options for Dalton, this would have also been my guess. So overall, I think the films they chose to utilize here do make a lot of sense. I think the only one I would have possibly changed is Moonraker for more, but that's just a nitpick. With a battle in space, there's some obvious potential for a video game level. I think they did a nice job here, but of course, this mysterious unlockable Skyfall level is missing, so that's cool. The front cover is half Daniel Craig, and his level isn't even included in the actual game. So it's time to live the legend and relive the world-famous spy's most iconic and intense undercover missions. Let's check out the original release for the Xbox 360. First off, props to them for bringing back the gun barrel sequence. For whatever reason, it's been missing lately. The addition of it really helps to make it feel like Bond. Then we get something surprising to me. It starts at the very end of the intro to Skyfall, in which MI6 agent Eve accidentally shoots Bond off of a train into the river below. It's honestly a great looking replication of the scene in the movie, and I guess I was sort of right with my flashback prediction. Being near death in the water, Bond is then thrown into flashbacks of his past, which explains the different stories featured in the game. Bond then awakens to the gameplay portion and, yep, back to first person. The perspective is basically alternating every game release at this point, but this game is looking pretty good, I gotta say. Walking forward, you see the infamous gold-painted body of Jill as featured on the cover, so it at least appears that we are going chronologically and starting off with Sean Connery's entry, Goldfinger. Except, we're supposed to still be Daniel Craig's Bond? I don't think I like this. I thought and hoped that this game was supposed to be paying tribute to Bond's history over the years and showcasing the different actors and their styles in the role. Having it be Daniel Craig is like rewriting history. It would be like having a movie about different presidents of the United States over the years and then Joe Biden is shown each time. Remember Joe Biden's famous 7 years ago speech? Alright, I'm clearly just making an observational joke. There's been a long-term debate on whether or not James Bond is the same person in each film or a codename given to different people getting the 007 number, but that latter theory doesn't really hold up. The James Bond film series was never supposed to have coherent chronology. And we've had this happen before with Daniel Craig being featured in the remake of Goldeneye, so I'm sure it's a budgetary thing. Maybe they don't want to pay to use the likeness of all 6 James Bond actors. But it's in the first person anyway, so you aren't seeing Bond most of the time. They already aren't using Daniel Craig's voice, by the way, forgot to mention that.
The girl is dead. What? He must have gotten wind of our investigation.
So why not get someone to try and impersonate the others' voices? Because then it would contradict the gimmick of the game being flashbacks, I guess. Why would Daniel Craig have a memory about being Sean Connery? Essentially, I have mixed feelings about this. They had to do something to make it be a story, and their final decision was to use only Daniel Craig. And nothing against Craig at all, he is my favorite Bond, but I don't know. Now I wish these were separate missions instead of being one overarching story. But it's not about what I want. Enough of that rant, let's see what we actually get. But first, a quick rundown of the first featured film, Goldfinger. I did already discuss it in my Part 3, my Goldfinger episode, but essentially, in the film, Bond must stop Auric Goldfinger, a ruthless gold smuggler, and his henchman Oddjob from detonating all of the gold in Fort Knox, causing the value of his gold to skyrocket. It was released in 1964 as Sean Connery's third entry, and was an understated massive hit, being the third most profitable Bond film to date adjusted for inflation. It is widely considered to be the best of them all, and the favorite of many casual and die-hard Bond fans. It's known for its many iconic moments, like the infamous laser scene, the intro to Bond's Aston Martin, the first time Q really becomes a gadget-oriented character, and of course, characters like Goldfinger himself, played by Gert Frobe, his henchman Oddjob, played by Harold Sakata, and one of the more popular Bond girls, Pussy Galore, played by Honor Blackman, who recently passed away. It's an obvious choice for the Connery film, so let's see what they do with it here. Your first mission is making your way through Auric Enterprises, which is already pretty far into the film. You're detonating planes with your smartphone, hacking into stuff with your smartphone, and basically modernizing this cherished 1964 film. It's a decent set to use for the video game medium, but it doesn't really feel like Auric Enterprises, especially with your smartphone. It kinda helps when you locate Goldfinger and Pussy Galore, but still. Meet up with Pussy Galore and then uncover the mystery of nerve gas and Operation Grand Slam. And just to make it even feel more rushed, we get this comical exchange.
By the way, I didn't catch your...
James Bond.
After finding Goldfinger's Kentucky keychain and trick pool table,
What's with that trick pool table?
you get to avoid Oddjob's infamous bowler hat before ridiculously falling some great heights. Escape Auric Enterprises, and then... oh no, the Aston Martin gets hit immediately, and yeah, we all saw this coming. It's time to protect Bond's groin from Goldfinger's laser, and we get some impersonators reenacting probably the most infamous exchange in all of the James Bond films.
Goldfinger, do you expect me to talk? No, Mr. Bond. I expect you to die.
It's just weird hearing a Daniel Craig impression say famous Sean Connery lines. So we're already at the climax of the movie, but at least Fort Knox is an obvious choice for the level, and it wouldn't be the same without it here. Make your way through with some help from Felix Leiter, kinda cool, and then you get to the big showdown with Oddjob himself in some hand-to-hand combat. It tries to replicate the fight in the movie pretty closely, and I think it's actually done pretty well. After using Thundershock, Oddjob's HP goes to 0, and now it's time to celebrate. But wait, oh no, that's right, Goldfinger is still around. Time to send him through the plane window in the same goofy way as in the film. I wouldn't have it any other way. So that's the Goldfinger level, a very speedy best of type level, I guess. Gameplay wise, it works like any first person shooter of its time does, really. And that's sort of where a lot of the game's complaints come in. It's basically an average Call of Duty clone. Having only ever played the original Call of Duty on PC back in the day, I can't really make that comparison myself, but I believe it. Anyway, let's move on to Mission 2. It's time to go 5 years into the future to swing in 1969. Sean Connery is out as James Bond, having not really wanted to even be in his fifth one, You Only Live Twice, so it was time to usher in a new era. Enter George Lazenby, a commercial actor slash model who sort of fell into the role by happenstance in a way. He was not an established actor, but there's a whole pretty awesome documentary out there that explains the whole story. Check that out if you have an interest. As Lazenby only did one film as Bond, the default choice here is On Her Majesty's Secret Service, which is based off of Ian Fleming's 10th Bond novel. In the film, Bond once again faces off against his arch-nemesis, Ernst Stavro Blofeld, except this time he's had reconstructive surgery to look less like Donald Pleasance and more like Telly Savalas. And it worked, he looks just like Telly Savalas, except not in this game. Since James Bond also looks completely different, the continuity from You Only Live Twice 2 years prior is sort of thrown out the window. This one has a weird plot of Blofeld wanting to hold the world ransom through the use of germ warfare, forever affecting production of plant life and livestock. He plans to do this by brainwashing women of different nationalities that he calls the Angels of Death. Bond poses as genealogist Sir Hilary Bray to infiltrate Blofeld's Allergy Research Institute in the Alps, and, well, this is the James Bond Christmas movie we've all been asking for. The Die Hard of the series, if you will. Bond also actually falls in love with Tracy DiVincenzo, played by the also recently passed Diana Rigg, not one of the Angels of Death, but a woman he saves at the intro to the film. A lot of Bond fans really love this film, and I've seen it placed as number 1 on a few different lists. I don't think audiences were quite ready for it back in '69 because it brought in almost half as much money as You Only Live Twice did, adjusted for inflation. It is the 5th least successful Bond film to date, and maybe people weren't ready to adapt to someone other than Sean Connery, who they knew and loved at the time. Because of this, On Her Majesty's Secret Service is sort of the cult classic of the series, and tends to be seen as the hidden gem. Me personally, I do enjoy it, but it's not in my top 10 or anything. I think George Lazenby is just fine in the role, and he definitely brings his own style to separate himself from Connery enough. I never really viewed the two of them as the same character, just a different take on the role. I think all of the Bond actors are different from each other just enough. Anyway, I won't go too much into the level itself, but let's see which parts of the movie they chose to turn into the video game medium. And forget everything I said about Lazenby because we're just Daniel Craig again. It cuts back to Bond being underwater, having these flashbacks, and then goes right into Tracy skiing before you're both attacked by Blofeld's men. It was at this point that I realized that if you are playing this as someone not really familiar with the films, it's a bit jarring to all of a sudden be with someone named Tracy and not Pussy Galore from the ending of the last level, and they're talking about someone named Blofeld, and now you gotta gun some guys down on skis, and what? The transition here doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but after a very short level, the avalanche temporarily takes out Bond, and we shift over to the climax of the movie. I get that these are brief glimpses, but wow, way to skip over an hour and a half of the film. With that said, it's a pretty cool looking level and actually does feel like Blofeld's lair in the film. And the fact that there exists a level based on Her Majesty's Secret Service of all films is pretty awesome. But it's just kinda bare bones. You even do the same fist fight against Blofeld that you did with Oddjob and certain other enemies. The ending is way different here too. Bond pushes Blofeld off of a ski lift. No bobsled chase like in the film. Just push him off and tell M that he's presumed dead.
Bond to MI6.
What's Blofeld's status?
Unclear. Presumed dead.
Well, that felt even more rushed than Goldfinger did. Oh well. The beginning of the next level actually tries to replicate the end of the film, with Bond and Tracy getting married, complete with the "we have all the time in the world" line that is sort of the film's motto.
But darling, now we have all the time in the world.
Just before Tracy is tragically killed by Blofeld, complete with some random lines from M from Casino Royale. This game is all over the place. After Lazenby's only entry in 1969, Sean Connery came back for one more official movie in 1971, Diamonds Are Forever, until finally calling it quits for the official series. By 1973, the series had its new Bond in Roger Moore, who went on to play the role from 1973 to 1985 over a span of 7 films. But the one this game chose was his 4th film, Moonraker. Moonraker was Fleming's 3rd Bond novel. Wait, what? This isn't Moonraker. Della, that's Felix's wife who was killed in License to Kill. So we're just gonna skip over Moonraker for now. Why have these go chronologically except for just Moonraker? For someone who appreciates things in chronological order, I mean, just look at my entire channel, this perplexes me and kind of annoys me. Ugh, okay, anyway. After Roger Moore ended his tenure as Bond in 1985 with A View to a Kill, Timothy Dalton took over for 2 films, The Living Daylights in 1987 and License to Kill in 1989. If you followed my whole series thus far, there were actually 2 games based on those films, so be sure to check out Part 4 and Part 6 for the main Dalton games. But alas, instead of Moonraker here, we go into their selected entry, License to Kill. Adjusted for inflation, License to Kill is the single least successful Bond film to date. It was far from a failure though, and still made a ton of money compared to its budget, but these late 80s films were in the period where people were getting a little burnt out on Bond. License to Kill is a revenge story with Bond trying to take down drug lord Franz Sanchez after Felix's wife is killed. It stars Daniel Craig apparently as Bond, Robert Davi as Sanchez, Carrie Lowell as Pam Bouvier, and Talisa Soto as Lupe Lamora. Also, Benicio del Toro as Dario. Alright, let's see what they do. The immediate transition from Tracy being killed to Felix's wife being killed, while similar in literary elements, come across as a bit much with how it's implemented here. Especially if you're expecting Moonraker, like I was, but Felix gives Bond some names and then gives him data that is on a lighter, like Felix lighter, and Bond is off to track down Sanchez, and just like that you're with Pam Bouvier in a helicopter. And now it's time to take down the drug cartel with a dart gun if you wish. And again, as a non-fan, you would have absolutely no idea what is going on and why, and even if you are a fan, it's not a given that you've seen all the movies used in this game. With that said, I mean, the details don't really matter for the game. If you're playing a Bond game, you're playing it to shoot faceless men by the hundreds and use some gimmicky gadgets. I may be a fan of the series, but I get how formulaic these are. But still, there are those who want to get immersed in the story as much as they can, and this game really does a poor job conveying it. So, now you're in the refinery toward the end of the film and planting bombs on things and making your way through more waves and waves of enemies, just straight murdering them. Eventually, you get to Sanchez and have to fight his sidekick Dario. Gosh, I sure hope we get to do the exact same quick-time fistfight that we've been doing. Oh, yep, there we go. In the movie, Dario suffers one of the more brutal deaths by falling into a cocaine grinder, so I wonder how they handle it here. And Bond just pushes him onto a conveyor belt and walks away. I'll just assume he stood up, jumped off, and went on to live a happy and healthy life. But now it's time to track down the big bad. I hope we get to land some more punches on him too. Don't want to stray too far from the gameplay style. Next up is the climax to the film, the Mountain Road Truck Chase, which is also appropriately the final level of the License to Kill game. And just like with that game, this is a driving mission. Eventually, you catch up to Sanchez and get to come to blows, of course. Take his machete hits like a champ and finally push him into some gasoline before quickly turning around before probably lighting him on fire. Or I'll just assume he stood up and walked away and went on to live a happy and healthy life. And that's basically it for that. License to Kill seemed to be the shortest level so far. So now do we move on to Moonraker or keep going with Die Another Day? Well, apparently Moonraker is being saved for last for whatever reason, so it's on to the Pierce Brosnan era. I've talked about his films a lot in this retrospective, so I don't have too much to add here. Die Another Day was the only film of his 4 that never got a game release, so I am glad this is the one they picked for variety's sake. It is probably my least favorite of his 4 though. Die Another Day was released in 2002 as the 20th official James Bond film. It falls right near the middle in terms of success as the 10th most successful adjusted for inflation. It stars Daniel Craig as James Bond, Halle Berry as Jinx, Toby Stephens as Gustav Graves, and Rosamund Pike as Miranda Frost. After Bond is captured and tortured for months on end in Korea, he is then traded back to MI6 in a prisoner exchange. He must now stop Graves from unleashing Icarus, a weapon that can harness the power of the sun, with the help of NSA agent Jinx. It's definitely not a favorite among fans due to its outlandish plot and reliance on pretty poor early 2000s CGI at times. And based on the game's front cover, I'm assuming there will be some ice driving with Bond's invisible car. Let's see what they do here. And just as I expected, we're thrown right into the second half of the film at the Ice Hotel. Kinda funny as the second half is typically where the film falls apart for most. I actually really like the first half, but agree with the masses that the film gets pretty ridiculous once they get to the Ice Hotel. So that's what we get for the gameplay. At least it looks pretty neat for a video game setting, but then, yikes, this is supposed to be Jinx? No way. Either Halle Berry refused to have her likeness used or they didn't want to pay her, but wow, this isn't even close. Especially considering I think the game has done a pretty good job in getting a lot of the characters to look right. But then again, Daniel Craig looks nothing like Pierce Brosnan. Going through the Ice Hotel, you'll encounter Graves in his goofy electric suit, which leads you to, oh boy, another exactly the same hand-to-hand combat against his henchman Zhao. Yeah, I expected nothing less here. I'm sure you do the same thing against Graves in the finale. Then you get to dodge that stupid spastic laser thing from the movie and, hey, wait, that's right, Zhao isn't even the one Bond fights in the scene in the movie. I feel like these could be seen as nitpicks, but man, the details they've changed just keep piling up. and I haven't even come close to mentioning them all. After that, it's time to drive on some ice and dodge missiles and the occasional Icarus beam while trying to take out Zhao's car. After retargeting the Icarus beam, it's then time to take on Emperor Palpatine himself, and you know, back when there was the fight against Oddjob in the Goldfinger level, I thought the combat style was a nice change of pace, as it kind of felt like the fight in the movie. At this point, this quick time hit the buttons do the exact same fight strategy on every villain in the game. I mean, the redundancy really hits you. It's just kind of cheap now. Anyway, you know Graves is going out of the plane, so let's just get on with moving on to Moonraker. Why is Moonraker last? Okay, so this isn't actually the first or even the second time we'll be embarking on a Moonraker level in this series. The first official Bond game, James Bond 007, had its own Moonraker level. Check that out in part 1. Then, one of the bonus stages in GoldenEye on the Nintendo 64 had a Moonraker based level, and man is that difficult. I first played that stage before even knowing what Moonraker was, so I didn't catch any of the callbacks or subtleties here. Anyway, let's go back in time 23 years from Die Another Day to 1979, the Roger Moore era. Moonraker was Moore's 4th Bond film and was released due to the popularity of Star Wars. For Your Eyes Only was supposed to be the film after The Spy Who Loved Me, but the producers were like, nah, space, yo. It was based on Ian Fleming's 3rd novel and stars Daniel Craig as James Bond, Michael Lonsdale as Hugo Drax, who also recently passed away. 2020 took a lot of 007 alumni. Lois Chiles as Holly Goodhead, and the return of fan favorite Richard Kiel as Jaws. It follows Bond stopping Drax from eradicating the population on the Earth in order to create a master race to live in a space station. So basically, stormtroopers on the Death Star. If that sounds ridiculous for a James Bond spy movie, that's because it is, and it knows it. Complete with an actual laser battle with astronauts in space, Bond and Jaws turning into the Roadrunner and Wile E. Coyote, and its overall goofy tone, Moonraker is notorious for being either the most hated Bond film or loved for how campy it is. And financially, this film really worked. Maybe it really was due to the popularity of Star Wars and having Bond in space, but Moonraker is the 7th most successful Bond film adjusted for inflation. Even not adjusted for inflation, it's the Bond film that brought in the most money pre-1995. It has grown on me over the years, but only a little bit. It's not one I seek out to watch to get my Bond fix in or anything. On my first viewing, it was my least favorite in the series, but that honor has since gone to a different Roger Moore film. So let's see what they do here for the final official level in the game. I bet you're at the Moonraker launch, then in space, and then you get to quick time fight both Jaws and Drax. Do I even need to play it? So far, yep, explore the spaceport until you encounter Holly, do some of the same kind of stuff you've been doing the entire game, and then the big man himself appears. It's Jaws, and this time, it's personal. At least Holly tries to help you fight him. That's something different. Electrocute Jaws in the jaws, kick him in the balls, and push him onto the planet, resulting in the meeting with Hugo Drax. And yeah, it really does look like Michael Lonsdale. This game is so hit or miss with trying to replicate the looks. I'm sure there was a lot of red tape with getting the licenses and all that. Then you escape the Moonraker blast chamber, and now it's time to suit up and become a space cadet. Daniel Craig going into space looks incredibly stupid. The more down-to-earth gritty Bond being in the campy Roger Moore style 70s film. Alright, then you get to the space station and it just feels like where you already were. I sure hope we don't have to fight astronaut Jaws. Don't. Actually, you don't. A mini spoiler for Moonraker here, but it's sort of a point of contention that Jaws turns good and chooses to help Bond at the end. You see, someone who looks like Jaws can't certainly fit Drax's qualifications for a master race, so he decides to side with Bond instead. And yeah, that's what happens here. Then you get to go to zero gravity and help give it a little more variety. So you float around for a little while in a laser battle, and maybe now I see why they left this for the end. Ending the game with pushing Graves out of a plane and Die Another Day would be a little anticlimactic. And you actually do get to float around in space for a little while. After that, you send Drax into the infinity of space and it just kinda ends. Speaking of anticlimactic, so that concludes the main game. But what of this extra Skyfall level? Well, luckily less than a month later, the Skyfall level was released as a downloadable content, but it was free. So at least they weren't suckering you into buying another level just to finish the game. But it makes you wonder why it wasn't included in the main game anyway. I mean, you start the game with a Skyfall cutscene, so the game was incomplete in October of 2012. Since the Wii U version came out in December, the Skyfall level is actually already included on it. So there's that, I guess. Let's conclude this game and this series for the time being. Being the hyped up 50th anniversary, it was time to bring the fans back after the load of mixed opinions on the Quantum of Solace film. After some delays, Daniel Craig's third Bond film, Skyfall, was finally released in October of 2012 in London and early November in the United States. It stars Daniel Craig as 007, Javier Bardem as Raul Silva, Ray Fiennes as Gareth Mallory, and most notably features a much bigger role for Dame Judi Dench as M, and the welcome return of the classic characters of Moneypenny and Q, played by newcomers Naomi Harris and Ben Whishaw respectively. It follows Bond trying to track down ex-MI6 agent Raul Silva, who is determined to humiliate and take down M as he believes she left him for dead. Skyfall was a major welcome return to form, and fans tend to love this one. Adjusted for inflation, and even not adjusting for inflation, Skyfall is the single high point of the entire series, being the #1 most successful James Bond film. While Quantum of Solace brought in just under $600 million, Skyfall demolished those sales with a whopping $1.1 billion, almost doubling it. Box offices loved it, critics tend to love it, and I would probably consider it my personal second favorite in the series, only behind Casino Royale. So yeah, Skyfall is a lot of fun, and I highly recommend it for those who haven't seen it. As far as the level goes, I don't really know what to expect here, but I'm sure you get in a fist fight. Let's finish this. So you start the level chasing Patrice through the streets of Istanbul, all the while Eve is in radio contact. If you don't know who Patrice is, it's not entirely explained, but it does tie in with the film. Eventually you reach a rooftop bike chase complete with some pretty comical effects of the same few cloned pedestrians moving out of the way quickly. Also, head-on collisions with traffic just result in a quick white flash of the screen and then you proceed. That's how that works. Ugh, it's so annoying running into oncoming vehicles at high speeds. Then Eve just kinda lets him jump onto a train with Bond following, and it's starting to look familiar to the very intro to the game. The DLC for this came out at the exact same time as the film did in America, so this could have been some people's introduction to the story. Now it's time for the inevitable hand-to-hand combat with Patrice that everybody saw coming, except it feels even worse here. Look at this, he just takes hits like it's his destiny or something. It eventually segues into the intro scene, and then instead of playing the whole game again in flashbacks, we now see what did happen to Bond. He's just kinda chilling on the shore, clothing perfectly intact except for his bullet wound. How is he gonna get out of this one? Oh, cut right to him taking directives from M to keep hunting Patrice in Shanghai. Yeah, in the film there is quite a bit that happens in between, but nah, no reason to explain it. But now it's the end boss fight, I guess, against Patrice from Skyfall. I would have never guessed this. How many of you who have seen Skyfall could pinpoint who Patrice even is? I sort of get that maybe they didn't want to spoil what happens in the brand new film, but it's just another thing with this game. After shooting him multiple times Red Grant style, out the window he goes, and we get this hilarious summary of the situation between Bond and M, ending the game.
But there's still one piece of unfinished business. About your injuries. You should know that I ordered that agent to shoot. Even though she didn't have a clear shot. I'm sorry.
Don't say it. You did what you had to. We all do what we have to survive.
Very well, 007.
Wow. Just wow. So that's the end of Bond video games as we know them up to this point. Did it go out on a high note? Well, let's see here. Oh god. Oh no. Oh, yikes. Yeah. No, it didn't. No, it didn't. In fact, I made a list ranking all of the console Bond games according to Metacritic scores. This game came in dead last. Worse than 007 Racing even. Even looking at it compared to many of the old computer games, even the awful Live and Let Die that I frequently ragged on in this retrospective, 007 Legends is still considered to be worse. People would rather play this janky, frustratingly awful boat driving game with Bond stuff shoehorned in than Activision's 007 Legends. Let that sink in. As I said before, most of its criticisms come from being a poor Call of Duty clone with uninspired missions and objectives, repetitive gameplay, no context given to what you're doing between missions, and a poor choice in films used. This game caused Activision to fire 150 out of their 200 employees to focus on mobile gaming instead. Not even a month later, after the Wii U release, the online stores for Activision and Steam pulled the PC releases for Quantum of Solace, Bloodstone, and this game without any notice, and Xbox Live and PlayStation Network did the same right after. Eurocom, the development company that was around since 1988 and helped make 5 Bond games before this, they shut down entirely after the release of 007 Legends. This game was an absolute disaster. So looking at it for the first time, now almost 9 years later, is it really that bad? I don't know. I pointed out a lot of issues with it, but I mean, I think the game looks pretty good for its time. Some of the character models and level design look pretty accurate to what they were going for, some not so much. Quite honestly, to me, the game seemed fine. It certainly did not live up to its potential, because I still think the concept could be pretty great, but just slapping Daniel Craig into every single mission really does take a lot of it away. And it's not even Daniel Craig doing the voice, so it lessens it even more. Like I said, there is probably a lot that would need to happen and a lot of money to be spent to really accurately utilize actors, set pieces, and music, and that's really not a likely scenario. So this game does have some good things to it, but they are far and few between. Activision then formally stated they were backing away from releasing licensed games in general, and they allowed their Bond license to expire early. Since then, we've had the releases of the PlayStation 4, Xbox One, Nintendo Switch, PlayStation 5, Xbox Series X, a huge advance in video game graphic and storytelling potential. Spectre was released in 2015, No Time to Die is set to hopefully be released in 2021, and there has not been a Bond game released since. There was a rumor that developer Telltale Games was working on one Bond game, but that company ended up filing for bankruptcy and closing in 2018. But, in late 2020, it was officially announced that a brand new James Bond game is actually in development by IO Interactive, a company known for the Hitman series. And at the time of me writing this, there isn't too much to say yet other than after a hiatus of a decade, there's a lot of hope that this upcoming game will revive the series. Because, well, by getting Bond games since way back in the Atari age of 1983, this series is due for a big hit. There have been some games released that certain fans love, mostly due to the multiplayer, but ultimately, you could even argue that Goldeneye is still the only game in the entire series that really truly had success. One game out of 24 or so. People know Goldeneye, they know its legacy and how important it was for shooting games in the future, and while I do love it, it also isn't considered to have aged very well. It's a series that unfortunately doesn't offer too much variety in gameplay styles. You play as a spy who uses guns, and future developers will always have GoldenEye's legacy shadowing over them. It's kind of sad in a way, because obviously I love this franchise. I'm really hoping there's some innovation with the new game, and new gamers will get to appreciate the series like I do. Until then, this retrospective will be going on a hiatus of its own, because that is it. James Bond will return in the future.